and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America,
the republic
and
for which it stands,
for which it
one
stands,
nation, under
one
God,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty
indivisible,
and
with
justice
liberty
for
and
all.
justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Okay, our first order of business is the roll call.
Can the commissioners who are at home please mute your televisions? The feedback is from the television. Thank you. Okay, roll call. Chair Sue.
Present, here.
Commissioner Blankenship.
Here.
Commissioner Frankham.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Strader. Oh, she's excused. Commissioner Wonder.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Chaffone. Here. Commissioner Alms.
Present.
Commissioner Satilli. Commissioner Satilli. You'll need to unmute your phone if you're on the line. Commissioner Satilli, *6 to unmute your phone. Commissioner Alternate Murphy.
Here.
And Alternate Commissioner Doherty.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm going to designate, since we have we have one absence, so do I need to choose which alternate? I know I need one. Do I choose? Or is there an order to that? We have two alternates here.
It's at the chair's discretion.
And also,
So you could go one this time and then two next time if you'd like.
Okay.
also Commissioner Satilli, we don't know if she's here or not. There's only 4 callers.
Oh, okay.
So since we have
perhaps I
not
will designate
confirmed
both.
her, I would go and recommend designating both alternates as voting members.
Great, then I will designate Commissioner Murphy and Commissioner
Doherty.
Doherty. And do we have any non-agenda public comments?
There are no public comments of any kind.
Of any kind, great. All right. Action items, approval of the minutes. And we're gonna vote on this, only vote if you were present either physically or electronically, if you were present at that meeting. Okay. So all in
Move
favor?
approval?
Yeah. What?
Somebody moved approval. I'll
Oh.
second it.
Great.
Who moved to approve? Sorry, I need it for the
It
notes.
sounded like Herman.
Frankham.
Frankham. Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, that's me. All in favor of approving?
Aye.
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 Do you need clarification on that or no?
We just need to find out if anybody objects or anybody abstains.
Continues. Okay. Does anyone object? And does anyone abstain? Oh, you abstain. Thank you. Okay. All right. Appointment of vice chair. Does anyone want to be appointed the vice chair? Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Herman for vice chair.
Okay. Commissioner Herman, do you accept that?
I will accept the nomination.
You will
All
need
right.
a second before a vote.
Okay,
I second the nomination of Commissioner Herman.
great. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And anyone that abstains? Okay. You guys, we are cooking. Look, we're just going to fly through this meeting. Look at us. We're just approving things left and right.
Just to
All
be clear, we want to make sure that I know I heard the audio ones, but make sure in the chamber that you're demonstrating your vote.
Okay. All right. Approval of a change in the bylaws and meeting schedule. What are we looking at?
Since it involves only a couple little tweaks in the bylaws, I move approval.
All right. I think we're all looking it over. Is that true? Mark, do you have something you want to do?
Yeah,
Can you
have
go over
I see a PowerPoint presentation, and I see a document that was given to us. Are we going to go over the PowerPoint or the document itself?
Yes, I'll give a brief presentation just so our new commissioners understand where we're coming from prior to an actionable item by the Parks and Rec commissioners.
Great.
So I know it's been a while since we've met in a regular meeting. First of all, I would like to thank you for your patience as we've gone through this difficult time. I hope that you and your families are doing okay. And it's good to be back in chambers with everyone. I'd like to give special welcome to our new commissioners to the commission, as well as our new permanent commissioners, Janae Alms. So it's good to have you here, and it's good to be back on a regular schedule. So as we begin this, those who were here, remember there was discussion in the past about changing the frequency of our meeting schedule. It was previously, since 2011, a quarterly meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission. But due to several factors, especially the need to call a couple special meetings, started the discussion as to perhaps we should relook at how frequent we meet on a regular basis. So in short, staff is recommending that the Parks and Recreation Commission approve and recommend approval by the City Council the revised bylaws for the Parks and Recreation Commission to amend Section 2.2, which is terms of membership, and additionally Section 4.1, regular meetings, will also be revised to reflect bi-monthly versus quarterly meeting requirements. So I kind of went through the background there, and it's been a while, but it was motioned and approved in February to modify this, and we're now coming to ratify that motion at that time. Just to go over the couple changes, as Commissioner Frankham mentioned, there are just a couple, and there are small modifications. Section 2.2, terms of membership. This is really just to bring it in line with what our current practice was. The previous language stated that it was done by draw, although the alternates have been for several years being selected and appointed by the mayoral appointment. So this is to bring the bylaws in line with the current practice. So basically the existing language is alternate members' terms are for 2 years. Positions of alternates are determined by draw. That will be modified to alternate members' terms are for 2 years duration. Positions of alternates are determined by mayoral appointment. So those are the only small tweaks to that one to bring it inconsistent, like I said, with our current practice. 4.1, which is kind of the nature of what got us looking at the bylaws. 4.1, meetings, the existing language. Regular meetings shall be held quarterly. In the event that a regular meeting, such and such, you can see it. The modified language will read as such. Regular meetings shall be held bi-monthly. The rest of the text is unchanged from there. So that would be the motion, the second item that you guys would be approving. The process, again, would be once, if approved by the Parks and Recreation Commission, it would then move on to the City Council for final approval of the bylaw adjustment for the Parks and Recreation Commission. So once again, staff recommends that the Parks and Recreation Commission approve and recommend approval by the City Council the revised bylaws for the Parks and Recreation Commission to amend Section 2.2, terms of membership. Additionally, Section 4.1, regular meetings, is also to be revised to reflect bi-monthly versus quarterly meeting requirements. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
I have a question. This is Genevieve.
Yes,
When do
Commissioner
we
Wonder.
start? I'm sorry. When would this start, Mark?
Chair, Honorable Chair, Commissioner Wonder, once this goes to the City Council, again, we are just making the motion and approving tonight, if so approved by the commissioners. The City Council will have to approve this. I'm looking at starting, I think January is a regular time by the time we can get the staff report drafted for the City Council, and we're looking probably late November, first meeting in December. So I think January would be a good target date, which we can set a schedule and approve it going forward on a bi-monthly basis.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I reiterate my motion for approval.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And any abstain? Okay. Okay. Let's move on to informational items. IPM? Yes? Okay, yes. Commissioner Sotilli, are you on the line? To unmute, it's *6. Has anyone joined from like a cell phone or a house phone? Has anyone changed which number they have called from? Oh, okay. But I'm wondering if anyone can answer that question for me. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Joel Menard. I'm the maintenance supervisor for the Parks Department. I'm here to give a 6-month update on the city's integrated pest management program, the IPM, that the city adopted back in March 11th, 2020. Did you get everybody a copy of this? Okay, that's just kind of the report. The presentation will be a little bit different, but the slides are similar to what you have there.
And was this slide, do the people at home, they have this? They don't have this. Okay.
Yeah, we'll send it subsequent to the meeting for reference.
Okay.
We apologize for that.
Okay, I just have a quick PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to show you just some of the challenges we are facing just for the adoption of the IPM. Again, the city adopted the IPM on March 11, 2020. The purpose of the IPM is to direct health and conscious and environmentally sensitive pest management strategies on the city-owned park. The goal of the IPM is to protect human health and the surrounding environment, monitor the presence of pests, education and training, and effective communication. The city will operate under a 2-tier approach. Tier 1 being the control methods are cultural, mechanical, environmental, physical, and biological. And Tier 2 control methods are trapping, organic pesticides, bait formulations, EPA toxicity category 3 caution chemicals, and EPA category 2 warning label pesticide. It'll go in that basically approach as we look at whatever pest that we're dealing with. Again, some of the challenges we are facing since removing the pesticides in the parks are weeds, and in certain areas. The removal of these weeds can be labor intensive, and lack of funding for the additional contract personnel makes it a little bit harder to keep those weeds under control. So slide 1 here is Seagaze Park. So we got Bermuda coming up through the cobble. We put the cobble in to help with the homeless down there on the beach. But it presents a problem trying to get the weeds up through the cobble. We put fabric up underneath, but the weeds and stuff and the grasses, which are tough, are coming up where the plant material is growing through. So again, it's just labor intensive. Here, this is Buddy Todd Park at the corner there. We apply mulch in a lot of our planters, but again, with the mulch and stuff, it's real hard to get the weeds, because when you have dirt, you can weed whip it down to the dirt. With the mulch and stuff, you kick it all over the place. We use the mulch up at Agri-Service, but her mulch has the weed seed, she says is baked out, but it has a lot of weed seed in it. And we find with our medium program and the landscape maintenance district program and the parks and all that stuff, we're getting a lot of palm and a lot of other weeds coming up through that. But it's a great program for us as far as the cost of it, which is nothing to our programs and stuff. So it's effective in that method, but it's also, you know, she's rotating her material a lot faster than it should be, just because of the square footage that she has up in her area. She has to move material in and out quick, from what I see. On our ball fields, we have the warning tracks, which is like a fine kind of pea gravel. I don't know if you play baseball and stuff. You have the infield, which is a brick dust. And then you have a warning track, Mitch, which goes along, this is Ron Ortega Park, which goes along the outfield line and then all the way back along the fence. It's basically the same material as the infield, but it's kiln dried one more time so that it creates like a crushed rock, so that when the kids run across it, you can tell the difference so you don't run into the fence. That's the warning track thing. So to get the weeds up and out of the warning track, it's basically aesthetic. On our part, or on the part from what I see, from what we're used to compare to getting rid of the pesticide. And then our biggest one is clover in our sports fields. This is Mance Buchanan Park. This was back in January, February. You can see all the little white spots, that's clover. We would put pre-emergence before, and then we would use feed zone. If you look on your back page there, it shows the main chemical that we're using. We got rid of glyphosate or Roundup. Probably almost 2 years ago, we removed that product from our use. The contractor wasn't using it. So one of the products that we went to is Speed Zone. It's a broadleaf weed control. Does well on clover, but it takes multiple applications for any kind of weed. But we since removed that. As you can see, I've sprayed nothing since January 1. You know, for the adoption of our IPM, we've sprayed nothing. We've been going on the assumption of, or not the assumption, but the control of, we want to be a pesticide-free city. I get calls from citizens and stuff. They, you know, say, hey, you got weeds here and stuff. But when I talk to them and tell them that we got rid of pesticides, the comments are always positive. They're like, okay, great, you know, you know, because everybody sees, you know, the commercials, Roundup, you know, get your, you know, if you got lymphoma, you know, come get your money. So the comments are always positive once I tell them. They understand, you know, like I say, just as long as everybody's on the same page, I'm okay with having this. But like I say, our number one challenge here is just on our sports field. I talked with some of the people at the leagues. Like I say, this is probably our biggest league, and our biggest field is with the clover. It's playable. The control that we were working on here, we were scalping it down, trying to get rid of the flowers. But the one thing you get with clover, since you have the flower, are bees. So he says the kids are getting stung in the ankles and on the legs. So like I said, you know, our control was, you know, okay, let's scalp it. We were actually mowing Mance Buchanan twice a week, where our normal practice is once a week, just to try to stay ahead and keep it really low so that the seed head wouldn't come back. But clover, I don't know if you know, it's a pain in the butt to get out of your lawn, and it can handle real short growing heights. So. But that's our biggest challenge. The other stuff is just labor intensive. We asked for in funding when we initiated the parks contract for additional contract staff, and that was denied. So we're kind of doing stuff with my in-house crew and with the contractor just to meet those challenges. I bought a couple weed eaters for a couple of my guys, so we go out and weed whip down. Another thing that we did is we mow the parks every week, or every park gets mowed every week. So 1 week out of the month, the contractor doesn't mow the parks, and they basically, each guy gets a weed whip, and we select certain areas, and we go down and just knock it down the dirt as best we can, and, start doing it that method. So we're looking at, and some of our, the gophers, everywhere you find where you have turf, you're gonna have gophers. I don't care what city you're in California, you're gonna have gophers. Our control method is actually pretty good. We trap. I find that to be the best method. With our soils that we have here in Oceanside, most of it's sandy loam. So if you go out to some of the parks, you'll see, sometimes you'll see some pretty big mounds, especially at North River Road, where it's real sandy out there. Just by being the sand, the tunnels collapse all the time, so the gophers are constantly trying to clear their tunnels. So when we were using baits and stuff, I found that the baits are just getting lost within the tunnels because they were constantly clearing out. We'd go out there and look, and you would see some of the baits sometimes in their mounds that they build. So we actually got rid of that a long time ago, and we went to trapping. And I think count to date from January 1, I think we're close to 100 gophers caught. At Melba Bishop alone, we're close to 40 gophers. And I don't know where they're coming from. It's like we've gotten uncles and aunts and cousins. It's like, doggone, but like I say, our contractor is doing a good job. My guys also set traps when they can, because you have to monitor that real close because the dogs, we had some at Marshall, where a dog dug into a hole and got a trap, and they're like, hey, and I'm like, well, dogs shouldn't be digging. That's one of the reasons why they got the trap on them. But anyways, the trapping is a good control measure for the gophers. Okay, any questions?
Yes. Commissioner Holmes.
I have two questions. The first one has to do with what you're talking about and trying to keep up with the weeds, and how most people that once you tell them that we've gone to no pesticides, they're supportive. Is it possible, or has anything happened yet with us possibly starting up people that sponsor their own group? And so say a women's club, they're in charge of making sure the weeds are out of this area. Is there a liability with having citizens do this voluntarily versus us having to hire people?
We get that at the beach, or just for trash. We put out buckets. Well, we used to, since our beach office is now kind of a hole. We're moved into the beach community center, but in our old office, if you remember, we were right there on the strand across from kind of the playground there. We would set out buckets, just Lowe's buckets or Home Depot buckets, because people would always come and ask. Johnny Lara is my specialist down there at the beach. And we'd just put trash pickers up there, and it's like, hey, it's on the honor system, by all means. They're like, hey, I'd like to pick up some trash. Right. It's like, no, here's a bucket, here's a trash pickup, so they would go out there. And people still do that. We still get the same faces because they're walking. They're like, hey, I'd like to help. By all means, I'll take every bit of help. I haven't really gotten any response for the park in that sense. And I think this is kind of new since it was adopted in March. That may come up.
Is that something that we could look into? I would not mind looking into that, but I want to know if there's a liability or any issue.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
No. Mark, do you know if there'd be a liability issue if we had just members of the community adopting a section?
Or a park.
Or a park?
I mean, we already have volunteer mechanisms in place, so it would just be making sure that it's an authorized group, and we make sure we go through our normal volunteer process working in the park. We have a lot of different volunteer groups that operate within different areas of the city. So it'd just be making sure that they follow the procedures, I think.
Okay, so if, Joel, would you have somebody in your group that could, we don't want to give them more work, but somebody we would know what areas you need help with, and then Mark, find out, I mean, how hard is it to get permission to be a volunteer group to do things? You said as long as they follow
A
regulations.
lot of form, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've had certain, for example, we've had Commissioner Alms and commissioners. We've had several groups that want to do beach cleanups, things of that nature. And traditionally how we've handled that is those are kind of a one-time thing. So they would go and pull like a special events permit just so we, one, know who's there, and we can coordinate with Joel and his staff to make sure that they don't have a big project going on or something that they need to avoid, such as the beach improvement project. So there's ways to do that. If it was going to be more of an ongoing situation where a group kind of says, as you're suggesting, Commissioner Alms, you know, we would like to manage this ball field and do it in working in conjunction with Joel and his team. You know, there might be a couple extra steps to make sure everybody's on the same page. And if it was an ongoing thing as opposed to a one-time event, there's a couple different procedures, but it's certainly not something that could not be facilitated.
And would that facilitation need to come from your department, and you say, yeah, we'd like to do that? Would it be something that we would say, yes, we would like to look into that, and then the city would choose?
Commissioner Alms, commissioners, I'm not quite sure if I'm following you.
So if I were doing this, I would immediately go home and I would get on the phone and start calling different groups and saying, we'd like to do this. Then I would contact Joel and say, Joel, who do we need and who can we talk to at your section to keep us inclined? And then I would go ahead and assign each of these people, these groups, something.
Yeah, I think that would probably go through Mark, like a Parks and Rec. And
I
then,
think, Commissioner Alms, I think the process would be if you do identify a group that has an interest in this, the first step would be to work with Joel, but I could certainly help facilitate that connection through Parks and Recreation. And then once kind of a framework of what the expectations are is kind of squared away, then it would work through Parks and Recreation to funnel the rest of the stuff in terms of making sure our liabilities cover from both entities and
Right.
things like that. So that it would be in conjunction with the parks maintenance crew. And then once that framework of what wants to be accomplished is squared away, we could, from Parks and Recreation, would handle the facilitation of the process from that point forward.
Does anybody see a reason on the commission why that's not a good idea to pursue?
I think the only thing that I could see is like an overzealous Boy Scout troop who's like, we've adopted this park and we're going to turn it into our park. You know, like just someone who got overexcited. But I also think that could be a really beautiful thing if they're, you know, I think community involvement in adopting parks or adopting a patch or something, you know, they want to pull weeds in a
I'll give them
park.
a sign.
Yeah.
Your park.
Yeah. Yeah. Go.
Commissioner Wonder, I have a question. Mark, is there a liability to the city with these volunteers on the city property?
Commissioner Wonder, Parks and Rec commissioners, obviously anytime an organized group is on city facilities, city property, there's going to be a liability issue, but it's more about managing it through the appropriate process. It's not something we have not done in the past. I think with respect to what the discussion is here, I think the point would be to start small and make sure there's continuity with whatever group is selected. Having done this in different areas and different agencies, some of the challenges is there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy on the jump.
Yeah.
And then it kind of fades out. And then as the parks crew assumes that this is being taken care of and then it's not. So I think we want to make sure we manage it small, build the foundation. We actually do have a group that assists with our maintenance at Heritage Park. It's a group that's been doing it for years, and there's a point person, and it's squared away. It works through my staff in Parks and Recreation, and it's a very seamless operation because there's continuity of organizations. So I think that would be the biggest concern from our perspective, is making sure that there's established foundation and build that small or slowly.
Then, do I need to have any special permission to proceed, to talk to you and Joel about this? I don't want to overstep my bounds. I just need to know.
Commissioner
help.
Alms, commissioners, there's no special permission. You
Okay.
would be doing this as a member of the public.
And then I just have the last question. Concerning ants, I looked on page 3 of your document. Second paragraph, it talks about pesticides may be used when pest thresholds get high. Ants are notoriously really hard to get rid of without something. Does this allow us then to use something?
Yeah, like, say, our program, our IPM still allows pesticide. That's what I was saying, the category 1s or the category 3s, category 2, the warning. We want to make sure that we're going through each one of those steps, that we're, going through the cultural, biological, all the steps before we come to that decision to actually use a pesticide. That's kind of like our last resort.
Okay.
And if we deem it to be that necessary, and, ants, they are a pest, they come and go. You got the fire ants, or you got fire ants out at Melba. Is it just the regular old ants, or we got fire ants?
Both. We have both.
We got both going on out there? And I know sometimes it's just with the water and stuff like that. So, I mean, we're really good with our water and our cycles and all that stuff, trying to keep, the weeds down and other kind of pests down. But with, like I say, with that soil that's out there, that's that sandy loam, it's like everything's perfect for them. So sometimes, even when you're doing the spray, depending on what you're doing, you got to look at what type of control are we going to get. Is this something that we're going to have to go out there every 7 days or 10 days, or is it something that we just let it be in and we try to move something around? Like a lot of our plant material, we're looking at different, just for the fact that, okay, if we got a certain plant that's, like around here, you got the hibiscus, so they're pretty and all that stuff, but they get white fly. So if any of the hibiscus, I guarantee you have white fly. So we like the flowers and all that stuff, but it becomes that problem to where we're going out there and we're having to treat this thing, every 7 days or 10 days to keep that appearance. Well, we need to start looking at other plant material that is more not susceptible for a pest, and still give us beauty. And a lot of the native plant materials you've probably seen, and heard that, a lot of cities are changing things to agaves and things that, just you can trample on, and they don't get a pest or anything else, and they still give you that appearance and look, but, not that spray where you're constantly doing something to keep it that, looking that way. So those are things that we're going through, a lot of our plant material and a lot of our planter beds and all that stuff, and changing things out. Like the front cover there, you see that's Pier Plaza there. We just finished that a few weeks ago. We put rock mulch there. We put aloes and some grasses and some sedges and stuff that can handle the beatings and those things. Like some, you can see the homeless are already laying on them, but they can handle that beating and they don't really get a pass. So other than the homeless.
Thank you very much.
All right, I have a couple of questions for you. Your name is Joel, is that correct?
My name is Joel,
Okay,
yeah.
just making sure. I just want to first off say thank you just for taking this all on and changing, and I know that's probably a lot just for the Public Works to all of a sudden pivot and change how you guys have been doing things for a long time. So thank you guys for doing that. How has it been received? Because when we were putting together the IPM, that was one of the things that we did discuss was the Public Works and how implementing it would be. Is this something that the staff has been excited that they don't have to work with chemicals, or are they like, this is a lot of work, or how has that been received?
Well, I mean, on our standpoint, I'm sorry, am I supposed to say council?
No, you say whatever you want, John.
The contractor does a lot of spraying, so with them, on some, it's they were like budgetary because the chemicals cost, so they were excited at first. They're like, oh yeah, okay, we're not going to spray, but then it's All right.
Yeah.
Then it becomes, the burdensome of
Yeah.
the weed control. And that's kind of what we're fighting right now. This year altogether has been crazy with
Yeah.
COVID, the weeds, the temperature, the humidity. We've had cycles of weeds that, normally we don't see, because as far as like areas like on the warning tracks, they don't get water. I'd still have weeds and, it's like, okay, yeah, those will be gone, once the summer heat hits. Well, with the humidities that's been really high, it's, things have been hanging around. So we've been doing extra, weed whipping and looking for efficiencies. I mean, that's kind of what we do. You're constantly looking for efficiencies. What can I do? I have a very small staff and the contract, trying to deal with them and getting through all our parks. We have quite a few parks. We don't have large ones, but we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then to get through all those and still keep the aesthetics pleasing, that's the one thing that grinds on me. I understand we got weeds, but just in my nature, I go, I pull my hair out sometimes when I look at stuff, but I understand. And like I said, when citizens call, I can hear the frustrations once I first talk to them. And then once I tell them, it's like, hey, we're getting rid of pesticides. We're trying to be a pesticide-free city. We may go to, the tiers and all that stuff, but I'd like to see that first cycle. Let's see what we can do. So that's why I left it blank, because it's like, well, you got, like you said, well, you can do this. It's like, well, I want to see. This is our first go around.
Right.
I want to see what we can get and what we can control, because that's our ultimate goal, is to get rid of pesticides. I'm an environmentalist. You got to be if you're dealing in landscape.
Yeah.
I love trees, I love grass, I love plants and all that stuff. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. So, I try to look at that in the aspects of, keeping all that stuff, keeping it nice, but also, keeping the pesticides out. I started with golf course and at Palamesa, and we actually had mercury on the shelf, because mercury is actually one of your best fungicides. And every time we sprayed it, we gave it to County Ag, and they went, that's yours, you spray it. Every time you spray it, we want to be here. Because it was straight mercury.
Yeah.
That was back in '85. So I understand of getting rid of that stuff, because they are toxic, and maybe not to you, but to some people, like the Roundup, may affect one person, the next person, same with
Right.
smoking. You want to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
And if we can get rid of that and still keep the parks looking good, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you for wanting to, I appreciate that you want it to look good like that.
Yeah.
I think that's important to all of our residents. I do want to make clear to the commissioners, because it says it was adopted. One of the things that was, it was adopted but not funded. So they said, yes, we like the sound of this, but we're not going, and by this, it meant extra manpower.
Yeah.
And they chose not to fund the extra manpower.
That was ouch.
Which is, a tricky place to be. So it's like, this sounds beautiful, but we're not going to give you any money to do it. So that is kind of the tension in this, is that by adopting it, they kind of put things in place, but then didn't, there's not really the funds to do it. So just to make that clear. When things have been sprayed, what has the signage protocol been? Because I know that was in the IPM, was like notifying the public when there were chemicals used.
Yeah, basically, we'll put a 24-hour notice.
Okay.
Doesn't matter, even though, some chemicals require that. Usually, a caution label does not, but with our IPM, it does that. So if you have the IPM on the back page, I actually made a form that we post,
Okay.
saying that this area has been chemically treated or will be chemically treated.
Okay.
It'll have the chemical that's going to be sprayed. We'll post that in that area. 24 hours prior to, we'll leave that, and then we'll pull it after we've done the spray or the reentry period, depending on the chemical that we spray. And then we'll post it on the city's website in the parks to notify that. So if anybody wants to check that, it'll be on there. And that's the communication, just let people know what's going on out there. because that's your right to know. And, you know, whenever you're seeing a contractor spray, they're supposed to have all that information with them for their safety and for the citizens or the public safety. They have to have that. That's why you got county ag driving around, and if these contractors don't have that posted on their vehicle, then they get a ticket. When we were spraying, that was my job, so I'd go around to the contractor and be like, you know, when people call me, what are they spraying? I'm like, go up and ask.
Them, yeah.
That's your right to know. Then they have to give you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have a kind of a specific question. What type of grass, like at Mance, Buchanan, like what type of grass do we have? And is there, I know some other cities have used a different type of seed in order to like deal with like that has been how they've dealt with weeds. So can you speak on that?
It's a hybrid Bermuda. It's a TIF dwarf.
Okay.
That was, and it's hydroseeded on there. It's a hybrid, so it's not really a seed.
Okay.
With your sports fields, our soccer community is probably one of our biggest sports leagues.
Right.
In baseball. So with the sports fields, mainly Mance and MLK are our two biggest facilities. It's the use. You know, so I mean, it's like, you know, my passive parks, you know, where you picnic and all that stuff, and even some of the, you know, the baseball fields and stuff, I get turf recovery real fast just because of the amount of use in there. But when you talk about our sports fields in Mance, you got everybody out there. I mean, that park does not get a break. It's sun up till past sundown because you got two lit fields out there. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge in itself without even talking about weeds.
Yeah.
Is just trying to keep that. So our maintenance program just for our sports fields is totally different than any other park. So, and then when you get the clovers in with the high traffic, you get a lot of people bringing weeds and stuff in their cleats and all that stuff, you know, so that you get transferred from, you know, facility to facility. You know, we still have probably, you know, from the comments of the league board and all that stuff, we still have one of the best facilities that they go out and play, because the Breakers, Oceanside, yeah, the Breakers, they're a real large league, and they're well recognized. I think they've won several state championships, you know, throughout the league. So they travel around the country and other cities and around San Diego and outside, and, you know, we still get good comments when we have tournaments that come into our facility. So I take pride in that.
Good. Good.
So it's a lot of work, and like I say, we put a lot of effort into those things. And like I say, with the clover, that's just, like I say, one of the challenges that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know even when we were writing the IPM, talking about like changing the type of seed, if that could potentially be, the type of grass, if that could be beneficial at all. But thank you so much for that.
I mean, you get seeds and stuff that are real close to the hybrid, and we'll when we do we'll air fine, we'll top press in the spring. And we have a closure time from May to kind of middle of July before. This year has been kind of funky just because COVID. But usually the first week in May, they're off through July, and then they start, league play starts like the 1st of August. So they usually, you know, get the couple weeks of practice. So usually around July 15th, they're back out there.
Okay.
And if we see areas, we'll sod. The league is real helpful. You know, if they have areas or something, they bought sod for me before. You know, we laid it down, so they're real helpful in that aspect because they want to keep the facility and they're vested in that facility. I mean, they wanted it. You know, they were in the planning meetings and all that stuff, so they want to make sure it stays nice, and I appreciate that from them. And that's been just every board that I've dealt with. Frank Zimmerman, I don't know if you know Frank from, yeah. So Frank's real involved in that, and you know, he loves the kids, and he wants to make sure that Oceanside gives the people the best, and he takes pride in our fields. And, you know, when he goes to other cities and stuff like that, and it's like, hey, come and look what I got, you know, so.
Okay. All right.
Sure.
Yes.
Back to the traps, I'm glad that you're not baiting anymore because there's always a lot of collateral, other animals and things. Have you found, it's a twofold question, actually. Have you found that you are having collateral kills with the traps? And how humane are they? Are they instant kill?
What's that?
The traps, do they kill
It's just-
instantly?
It's the bio traps, it's the snap, so they're in the ground. So, gophers are in the ground, so basically, when you find the tunnel, you set your 2 traps, so hopefully you're getting them either way, and.
Are you finding that you're, other animals that you're not really targeting that are?
No, and sometimes, like, if you go around, you'll see like a stake, pointing out, and they'll tie a rope to that. Well, we don't do that. So I tell the guys, it's like you set the trap and you leave it in there. You monitor it, and they're monitoring all the time. They're checking the traps daily. But sometimes you'll find that, a dog will dig up and they'll pull that because it'll be attached to a rope or something. And that's where you could get that potential where someone would drag it off, and that trap could not be, if it was a trap that hadn't been snapped or something, so it's still in contact. Usually those things, once you touch them, they snap, just like a rat trap. As soon as you touch that little thing, it.
Are the traps off to the sides or in areas where people really shouldn't be anyway?
No, because the gophers are all over the place. I really concentrate on the actual sports fields itself because that's where the potential of injury can come. So if I have a gopher hole, like I say, in some of the parks where we have, and it's a majority of them where we have the sandy loam soil, the tunnels collapse because it's sandy. So when they mow it or kids are running across it, those tunnels collapse. Well, when that tunnel collapses, you get that trench sometimes on the surface. So we're constantly top dressing those out, and there's that potential where someone could twist their ankle and all that stuff. So we really concentrate actually on the sports fields. The outer areas we trap, but we really concentrate on the sports fields because that's where the kids are or people are. So we want to make sure that we create a safe environment when people are playing in our park.
Well, I'm glad that you've stopped baiting.
Yeah, like I said, I stopped actually quite a few years ago just for the fact that, I found once I seen it starting to come out where the gophers were pushing it out of the holes, just because the tunnels collapse, and you're basically find a run and you put the bait inside the hole. You don't put it in the feeder hole, you actually put it in a run. And as they go through, they would eat it. But it took multiple feedings, so it took a lot of baits. And it, like I said, it was just ineffective and cost-wise and, sorry, I keep sliding, cost-wise and just effectiveness. Because you don't really see the kill because the gopher would, you'd think, die in the tunnel or in their burrow. Where a trap, you can actually count it.
For me, it's because I'm a member of Audubon Society, and there's a lot of raptors and even coyotes that have died because of, and dogs, pets have died by eating baits, getting into them. So thank you.
Are there any questions from commissioners who are not in chambers? Okay. Did you have any questions?
My question is actually
Okay, great.
Oh, you're
All
welcome.
right. Thank you so much. Thank you for that presentation and taking the time to answer all of our questions. And Mark, are you up next?
I believe so.
You're live. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
All right, Honorable Chair, Parks and Rec Commissioners, good to be back with you. I'd like to thank Joel. That was a great presentation. Appreciate him bringing that forward to the members of the commission. So I'm here at this time to give kind of an update on the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Project. You'll remember we had a special meeting in May of 2020 to kind of amend the approved CIP project because one item that was recommended by the commission, specifically the pump track, was not included in the initial round of funding. So we had a special meeting to approve the CIP with the addition of the pump track study. So I'm here to kind of give an update as to where we've been. Obviously, with COVID, things have been a bit of a challenge. We have kind of been a little delayed in that process, but we're trying to get back on track, and so I'm here to give you kind of a status update. Just a refresher, Development Services actually oversees the Capital Improvement Program, which is a different division or different department from Parks and Recreation, but we have great collaboration with them in specifically identifying projects and then funding those projects to completion and advocating for them, which is one of the main purposes of the Parks and Recreation, is to advocate for these facilities and for these projects. I just want to give an update. The ongoing projects that are in process, meaning there is action underway previous to last year, was the Buchanan Park improvements, that's funded at $1 million, and the El Corazon Aquatic Center. Just a quick update. The Buchanan Park improvement project is, I think as mentioned in here, a very unique project because we have that project, we have the watershed project, we have the North County Rail Trail. So there's a lot of parties involved with that site that's going on. So in collaboration with Parks and Recreation, as well as Development Services, that's kind of moving through the process in totality of all those projects being completed. We are not seeing the progress in terms of actual construction, but that's a funded project and is in process. The El Corazon Aquatic Center, $24 million project approved last November, is very much underway. I was out on site today. I'm happy to report it is moving along quite well with anticipated completion sometime in summer of 2021, but it's starting to take shape. And it's good to see that movement going forward. So just kind of an update on those are the ones that are actually in progress with actionable items that have been taken. Just to review, the approved projects that Parks and Recreation Commission approved last year and then amended in May to include the additional $50,000. Mance Buchanan field lights, this came up as many members have come to this commission as well as to City Council with a request for more field access. Several different ways to do that. One of the, I guess, fastest ways is to light fields that currently aren't lit to give us additional hours in the evening time, especially during the winter months where we don't have as much daylight. So that was estimated at $1 million. Parks Master fee study, that is in conjunction with a citywide fee study to identify the developer impact fees, which do go towards funding park improvement projects. The dog park study, which was a $300,000 allocation towards identifying and potentially some design elements of where some off-leash dog areas could go within the city. The John Landis Community Center study, for those that don't remember or who are not here, John Landis Community Center is a center that has been offline for about 10 years now. It's in the western part of the city. It was identified in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that that is a facility that needs to serve the community in that area, and it was recommended by that study to bring that back online. Because it has not been functioning as a recreation center for 10 years and has been leased to different entities, there will be some modifications needed to bring that back online as a traditional recreation center. So that is what that study should include. The pickleball facility study, and I know there are some on this commission that are very interested in that. So that is the one that was funded and recommended by the Parks and Recreation Committee, and the aforementioned pump track study, which was inadvertently left off, thus the need for the special meeting in May to add that funding back in. These ones have been approved and funding has been allocated for these capital projects for the year of 2021. So like I just mentioned briefly, COVID obviously put a bit of a delay in us moving forward with these projects, but we are in the process working with Development Services to bring on a consultant who will be the point person in managing all of the park's improvement projects. So we'll work closely with them. The idea is that we bring somebody on. We do have funding in the CIP for the administration of all these projects. That's funded annually through our general fund budget process, so it's not necessarily part of the allocation that you guys recommended. So there is funding for that. That person will be, their sole purpose will be to oversee and to see these projects through completion. So we hope to have that in place in the next several weeks, and then hopefully we'll start to see the progress for these projects for 2021. So some of the proposed projects, what we're here to do today is to kind of give you an update of where we were, which is what I just did, and also to get the commissioners to start thinking about projects for year 21, 22. It's hard to believe, but we are coming up upon the time we will need to submit these to the city council for budget. Budget takes place in late December and early January. So it is anticipated that we will need to call a special meeting at some point in December to kind of finalize what our recommendations will need to be. So just to kind of give the commissioners a heads up, that's probably something we'll need to do. But some projects that are proposed because they're kind of in continuum of previous projects. Obviously, the Buchanan Park construction, that will continue to be funded until its completion. The 2021 budget had a study for the John Landis Center. So a possible cascading project would be the design of that, whatever the findings come from. We could then fund the design process of what that facility will need to look like, so we can bring that online in the future. As well as the El Corazon Senior Center Phase 2 final design. So those are some things that are kind of have been in a placeholder, but have not been allocated because they were funded or they were proposed in out years, not in 2021. So those are some potential ones that are at least have been identified, but not recommended or funded just yet, just to kind of get your mind thinking. Some other future projects, what we're here to do today is get feedback and also for me to answer questions of any of the commissioners on certain projects that they might have in mind, but some potential projects. El Corazon Park Site 1, that's been getting a lot of attention lately. As many know, the El Corazon property is a very large property. The specific plan calls for numerous parks on that property, none of which have been funded or designed. There's a specific plan, but much work would need to be done in order to start the process of bringing that to fruition. So that's one option. Dog park design would be in continuation of the previous dog park study. El Corazon Phase 2 design, which would be the senior center. The Phase 2 was to add additional buildings. That was the original master plan of that facility, was to add more as time went on. That's an option. In continuation of the pump track study, it could be a design and a construction phase. And then also another option would be, there's been talk from our bike and pedestrian committee about adding some sort of mountain bike course within the city of Oceanside. So those are just some thoughts and some possible future projects, but obviously we're here today to get feedback, answer questions so that we can start to, as a staff, prepare a little bit more detail as to potential projects and what those cost allocations might be. So with that, happy to answer any questions or take any recommendations at this time.
Yeah, let's start with any questions or comments from people who are not in chambers, from commissioners not in chambers.
So this is Mark Herman. I have two questions.
Go ahead.
In the page that talked about the review of approved 2021 projects, it indicates that the Parks and Rec Commission approved the following projects and recommended City Council approval and allocate funding. Has the City Council approved and allocated all of the funding listed on this page?
Commissioner Herman, fellow commissioners, yes, all those proposed projects that were recommended in 2021 that the commission voted on in May have been approved and funded.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is the $1 million for the Buccaneer Park improvements. Could you refresh our memories on exactly what is planned with that $1 million?
Yes, Commissioner Herman, fellow commissioners, that's a project that's been ongoing for quite some time in conjunction with the numerous other projects that are going on in that area. It has a lot of elements of kind of redesigning and updating the park with different elements because of the other projects there, whether it's the rail trail or the watershed project that's going on. Also, there's the decommissioning of the La Salina plant. It will require some modifications to that. Some of the identified ones are new bathroom area, as well as we currently have a contractor that operates out of there. It's a very old facility. And so, bringing that kind of up to a current code, as well as some other improvements in the area that might be required because of the other projects. No specific design has been finalized at this time. It's an ongoing dialogue with all the different projects that are going on.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wonder, Commissioner Frankum, Commissioner Doherty, any questions?
Commissioner Frankum here. I made a heartfelt case at the May meeting for the importance of trails that we saw in all the public meetings last year that were held during that Parks Master Plan study. And I wondered, in addition to the Inland Rail Trail and the Coastal Rail Trail, what other trail projects are in the works, and what state are they in, and why wouldn't we add that into the consideration for funding for next year?
Commissioner Frankum, fellow commissioners, excellent question, and that was a very poignant topic of conversation. You'll also recall from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was identified as an area of deficiency and was recommended there be a specific trails master plan. That
right.
It wasn't specifically called for. It is something that does need to be addressed. As part of the general plan update, which is currently going on through a different department, trails is supposed to be included in that general plan update to include that. At this time, I don't have an update as to where that is. That's a very large, as you can imagine, project and takes quite some time, but we are involved in those meetings, and we have made that a very specific point of consideration that that is something that was identified in the Parks and Recreation Plan, as well as our outreach to the community. And we appreciate that we are being included in those discussions and are making sure that when the general plan elements, which there are several of, are being discussed, that trails is a primary concern there.
Yeah,
Great. Well, it's good to hear.
I would like to kind of second the concern about trails. I think also after our last meeting, it kind of came to, our concerns were kind of addressed by saying the general plan would address the trails. I think after that meeting, some information came to light that there's no one specifically addressing trails. I think Megan said, I think there have been a couple of emails as far as so is there someone on the general plan who can do that, who has experience with trails? And it kind of came out that there wasn't a lot of great information concerning trails. So I would just encourage, as you said, that's something that the Parks and Rec is going to continue to pursue, that is something that we stay on top of just to make sure that it is addressed. And then I have a question about as far as funding works. Is trails, if a trail runs through a park, then is that the park's budget? How does a trail is a big thing, so who funds a trail?
Depends on, Commissioner Sue, or Chair Sue, and commissioners, it generally depends on what property that lies on and who's being the one that's constructing it. So if it does run through a park, It would probably be part of the park's budget to construct that.
Just in the park, but then the part that doesn't run through the park, it's a different, that's the general budget or something?
Well, most of it would come from the general fund. You know,
Okay.
even if for some reason it was on an easement of somebody else's property and the city was provided access to connect trails through that.
Yes.
If the agreement was there, the primary funding would most likely have to come through the city since it would be a city trail system.
Right, because I think that, and Commissioner Frankham can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it wasn't just trails in parks, but it was like a cohesive trail program that connected the whole city. So obviously that's, as much as I wish all of Oceanside was a park, that's obviously going to, involve some non-park land. So we're going to have to figure out how to fund that. So I do think that that is something that we keep in mind for the future, because if it's not getting addressed in the general plan, and then maybe we take it up and it's our job, Mark. Don't worry, Mark, I have more questions. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the best course of action is to hire a consultant to serve as a project manager for Parks and Rec CI projects. So that's not a Parks and Rec staff member, and that's not a developmental services parks member or staff member. This is another person from outside of city staff being hired. Is that true?
That would be correct. A consultant would be hired to manage the capital improvement project specific
For
to
the
the
parks.
parks. So the city does hire several consultants in different departments for different operations. This would be one specifically for the parks capital improvement projects, not, I want to make that clear, not general capital improvement projects, which
Just
there are
parks.
several of.
You get your own person, okay. And then similar to Commissioner Herman's question about Buccaneer Park construction, El Corazon Senior Center Phase 2 final design, what does that entail?
It would, right now, the master plan for El Corazon Senior Center had different phases
Right.
involved in it. And so it was always supposed to be several phases, but they only designed and then went through construction of the first phase of it. So the second phase would be, it would need to be designed in conjunction with what the property looks like now. Obviously, when that project was built, the Aquatic Center was not supposed to be next to it. That plan, that specific plan for El Corazon, the El Corazon site, was amended to bring the Aquatic Center to be adjacent. So the final design would need to be updated and made to what the property looks like now.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, Commissioner Wonder.
I have a question. How is the dog park study going? Do we have anything at all that the community would be interested in learning about?
Commissioner Wonder, Honorable Chair, Commissioners, at this point, no progress has been made on the capital improvement projects, which is, been unfortunate, but that's just been one of the challenges with COVID and the adjustments that we've had to make, which is why we're trying to get things back on track and get a consultant so we can start making progress on that.
Okay. Not even the
Thank you.
lights? Because most of these are studies, but nothing is happening even with the lights.
That is correct.
Okay. I have one more for possible future projects. I wrote down trails. I think that's something that we need to stay on top of. I also think we've talked about before about adding more handicap accessible components to our parks. If we're not going to have a park that's completely dedicated, that's completely ADA compliant, then at least having components at, I think, and I think that was something that came up in the Parks Master Plan, is that residents want to see a greater accessibility at parks. So yeah, I think that's something that we need to write as far as possible future projects. And then as just a mom who spends a lot of times at Oceanside Parks, we need shade. The shade is, please, for the love of, please give us some shade.
Chair Sue, if you weren't going to mention that, I was going to remind you of that because I know you have brought that up several times.
Maybe that is the spark that led me to being here in the first place, was we need some shade at these parks.
I'm happy to
Thank
report
you.
we will be putting some shade at Alex Road Skate Park. Obviously, that's one element, but it's a start.
Great, thank you. All right, anyone else in chambers have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Blankenship.
Okay, yes, I do have 3 questions for you, if I may. First of all, I think this probably falls under the review of approved projects. General question, is the aquatic center paid for at this point? Or at least, is there additional funds required for finishing the aquatic center?
If I heard you correctly, I think you asked Commissioner Blankenship, is there any additional funds needed for the aquatic center?
Correct.
No, that is a fully funded project.
We have talked a few times about, I remember, parking being an issue. And when we talk about El Corazon Senior Center Phase 2, et cetera, and the swimming, and the aquatic center and so on, are we going to have a problem with that? Is that going to be considered as the design develops?
Use your mic.
What? It's on.
I know, but you gotta get
Oh,
closer.
okay, sorry.
Commissioner Blankenship, your question regarding parking. Parking is always going to be a consideration as we add new facilities or expand on facilities because we know it's a primary.
Yeah, but I mean, it was specifically mentioned about being a real issue up there, these commingling of groups.
Yeah, the current parking situation is going to be a challenge as new facility comes online. You know, we do have parking in the area at the SoCal lot, which we're in conversation with them. Nothing's in stone. We're actively monitoring not only what's going to take place with the aquatic center, but also how that might be impacted, and that would certainly be considered with any design element of Phase 2.
And finally, I think this is another review and approval type question. Would it be appropriate for me to ask with regard to Heritage Park, has there been a decision made or what's going to happen with regard to the resident on site?
Yeah, Commissioner Blankenship, good question. We are in process of working with our legal department as well as our risk management department for those that don't know, Heritage Park has for many years has had a caretaker that's been assigned to that park. Unfortunately, Mr. Andrade passed away a few months back, and so we've been in the process of kind of updating that contract, and we're in conversation with our city attorney as well as our risk management. Both of them are kind of working through what needs to be in place for a new contract for a caretaker.
But at least the need has been identified?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt that there's a need out there. Yeah, currently our staff is having to go out there and manage a lot of the things, and it's certainly a toll from a personnel standpoint. So, you know, we do anticipate getting another caretaker in place. That is still the goal and the objective. It's just many things have changed in terms of the contract since when Mr. Andrade had signed it, and we need to make sure that that gets updated and it's being run as through the right channels.
And I'm going to guess that the individual that's chosen to be the caretaker will want to live in that house that's there, so that's going to need some improvement.
Yep,
funds as well.
Yeah, that's been identified, and that's traditionally what we're planning on, is that the caretaker would live on site, as has been the practice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Some of the things I say might be unpopular with you, it's my opinion. I come from development on the private side, and some large developments actually, and what we found years ago were that large studies and consulting firms tend to delay actual forward movement and action. So I'm looking at all these dollars that are set aside for studies, and I'm hearing everybody questioning about, well, what's happening, and your answers are, well, nothing's really happening. I understand the COVID thing is a delay, but what can actually be done to push things beyond studies? I mean, is there a holdup, or is it just that the studies haven't actually been completed? And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was the trails. Just a question, is there any consideration of ever working with some of the national, like all trails, or is there any county trail projects that are going on where Oceanside could become a part of?
Commissioner Chaffone, to the last question, I'll answer the first. Yes, the Coastal Rail Trail is a multi-agency operation that, hopefully at some point will run from Camp Pendleton all the way down to San Diego. And so, obviously a portion will go through Oceanside, a portion does currently go through Oceanside. And so we do work with multi-agencies on specific trails. We also work with our local groups, Friends of El Corazon. There are a couple trails out there now. There are more trails planned. So we always consult with them, making sure that they're part of the process that has been identified in the specific plan. To the first question regarding the progress, the bottom line is, we just don't have not had the personnel in place to be able to move these projects forward. And so, there is budgeted money for administration of these programs. There's two ways to do it. You can hire a staff member, or you can hire a consultant to do that. And in the midst of COVID and the challenges that kind of threw everybody, there was no progress made. And so the fastest way to do this and to get some progress made would be to bring on a consultant, which we can do much quicker than to recruit, go through a long process, which could take months.
As far as the consultant, is that actually an individual or a consulting firm?
Commissioner Chaffone, fellow commissioners, I can't speak with absolute certainty, but traditionally the city would bring on a consultant as an individual. Now, they may bring on somebody from a firm, but that individual would be assigned to these projects and work on these projects under contract.
To go along with that, I'm looking at the pickleball facility study for that amount of money. And is that because you're trying to do a study for a huge facility, or is that money which can be used right now, instead of studying it, could build pickleball courts? So where that's been allocated, does it have to go towards a study, or can it go towards building them?
Commissioner Alms, fellow commissioners, I think there's some flexibility in that based upon what the study finds. So if the study deems that, there are certain sites available and there's funding there, then I think there's the ability for that. Obviously, the funding was put in place as a recommendation and approved as such. I believe the group has submitted plans and there is progress going on. So as those come, perhaps that money could be reallocated based upon, how estimates and things come in.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. On the future projects, possible future projects first to consider, I know that they were trying to get some more gyms built for these young people. Is that anywhere could possibly be in consideration for future?
Commissioner Alms, Chair Sue, and fellow commissioners, that's obviously what we're here today to do, is to basically provide that to get the commissioners' minds thinking about different projects as you talk to different constituents in the community, as well as the things that you notice. Obviously, we have to present a concise plan that we think is realistic, and obviously funding has to be available. But the idea would be that come December, there is a recommendation to council as an action item with a specific plan as to what we recommend to be put into the CIP project for 21-22. So I would just, for those who have not refreshed the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it might be a good opportunity to review that, look at where the deficiencies might be based upon that study, and then that might help to shape some thoughts and some suggestions for our December. Yeah. And of course, staff is always available to answer any questions. Feel free to give us a call. I'll be happy to
Can we make sure
that,
I feel like we've had, I think, 3 or 4 new commissioners since the master plan. Can we make sure that they all receive a copy of that?
Yeah, if they want a hard copy, just let us know. It is on the website in its entirety there, as well as the appendices. So just let us know. We'll reach out to the new commissioners to see what format they'd like to have that in.
Okay, great. Is there anything from commissioners that are outside of chambers? Okay, so let's move along. And now this next item, it's not, you're just informing us. We don't have any, you're not asking anything of us?
That is correct.
Okay.
So, once again, good to be with you. I'm going to review Council Policy 100-55 for a couple different reasons. One, as part of the Parks and Recreation Commission, you will have a role as members in this. So I felt it would be important to bring everybody up to speed on this, get familiar with it. It is several months away before any actionable item will need to be taken by the Parks and Recreation Commission, but a little bit of background. We did receive, if you haven't noticed, on our website, the city's website under Parks, there is an application for renaming a facility or naming a facility. So it's always up there. So we did receive an application from somebody, and Parks and Recreation has a role to play at the appropriate time. So I felt it would be prudent to inform all the commissioners of this policy so that when the time comes, we at least have a good foundation of what it is. So just to kind of go through, there are certain eligible facilities that are eligible for naming or renaming. Now, this can be the construction of a new facility, which would be the initial naming, or perhaps a renaming of a currently named facility. Just to kind of go through, the parks that are eligible would be city-owned facilities, recreation and open space, trails, park sites that include developed and undeveloped areas, as well as designated open space areas, other recreational facilities and amenities, city-owned facilities such as sports fields, recreation, leisure activities, things that are traditionally used in the recreation setting. Ineligible facilities, just to get you up to speed on the policy, city-owned buildings, so our administration buildings, city hall, libraries, the civic center, chambers, things of that nature. If a police or a fire facility is built, those are not eligible for naming after individuals or areas or things like that. Also support facilities like our KOCT, that's out off Oceanside Boulevard, water utilities area, things like that are not eligible. I apologize. All right, so there's an order of preference, and you'll see it. I don't want to go through the entire document; it is quite lengthy, but there are certain guidelines, and in order of preference for naming a facility, the first one is geographic. Is there a location that would be appropriate to name it after? For example, Luceño Park. That was named after the Luceño Indians in that area, and that's an example of that. Other considerations, obviously, topography, flora, cultural or history, and then extraordinary circumstances. So a person or a group if it fulfills the criteria or the policy. Just to give you an update on the timeline and why it's important. So the City Council will not accept an application to name or rename or dedicate a facility unless in April of each year, the City Council designates facilities for which they will take applications for renaming. So obviously we're a ways out from that timeline. The next step, a list of the facilities designated by the City Council will be submitted to the Parks and Recreation Division immediately. So that would come to us. We would know what facilities are up for eligible for renaming. Or if there's a new project that's going on that might be coming up in 6 months, they would allocate that for us to basically accept applications for. The appropriate director will make applications available to the public with the deadline of June 1st. So if in April, the first meeting in April, they designate facilities for naming or renaming, applications can be received up until June 1st. The applications will be referred to the Parks and Recreation Commission, this commission which before I stand, with staff recommendations in the month of September of the same. So after we receive them in June, we have June, July, and August to review them and then make appropriate recommendations before this body in September. And then the naming and the dedication process shall occur once a year for existing facilities and as needed for new facilities. So that's kind of the timeline. So April is really where a designation to where do we need to, if they don't designate anything for naming or renaming, then there's no action needed by this commission or the Parks and Recreation Division. So as such, if April is the time the council needs to make a recommendation, it would be appropriate for the Parks and Recreation Commission to make recommendations to them for review. So as the months go along, if based upon feedback, whether in public meeting or that we've referred to the commissioners that's come through us, we think it's appropriate and want the Parks and Rec Commission to be prepared to make a recommendation to the City Council in March, whether they feel any facilities should be considered for renaming. And this, like I said, this started because we did get an application that was received in September for the renaming of Alex Road Skate Park. Again, we are not within the window at this time for that to be up for consideration, but as we anticipate perhaps more consideration to be given that, I wanted to provide the opportunity for commissioners to ask questions about the policy, but most importantly, be prepared if something comes before you, such as a park renaming application. Yes.
I'm just curious, so is this a completely new policy, or is there a possibility that a facility could have multiple name changes throughout the years? Do they expire?
Commissioner Safone, this policy was put into place in 2003. And, like I said, I think when they drafted this policy, it was possibly because they kept getting requests. So they put a policy in place to where there would be a structure in place in terms of a timeline of how this would be moved through.
And has there ever been any consideration for a naming contest, or is it just somebody applies for it and council approves?
Commissioner Safone, fellow commissioners, I can't speak as to what was done before, but this, like I said, this policy has been in place since 2003, and this is the naming policy that the city currently operates under.
Can you, go ahead. Questions?
So I'm just making sure I understand. This application then will be considered in March of 2021, and then it goes through till, looks like it won't even be considered until the fall of that year?
This application kind of spurred the need to bring this policy before the Parks and Recreation Commission. The intent would be that the Parks and Recreation Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council in March, whether they feel any facilities or parks should be up for renaming, so that the council can then take action or no action based upon the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Could you tell us about the naming of the park originally?
The Alex Road Skate Park? Mm-hmm. Well, Alex Road Skate Park is on Alex Road, so it was identified under the policy
geographical.
naming the geographical
Gotcha.
area.
Okay.
This is Mark Herman. Hasn't this same application come through at an earlier date? I thought I read something that a request had been made back in 2013, just after the park had opened, that it be renamed for this individual.
Commissioner Herman, fellow commissioners, I do believe an application, or at least a discussion and a request, did come through many years ago. I'm not specific on the exact year, and I'm not sure exactly how long after the park was built, but it has been a topic of conversation in the past.
And this is Mark again. I'll just point out that that specific park actually has been called that name, the Prince Park, probably since it opened. So, in honor dedication of the individual that people are asking for the park to be formally named at this point in time. So, when my son was a skateboarder, and he never called it Alex Road. He always called it, Prince. He's going to Prince. So I'll just point that out.
Thank you. That's, yeah, I feel like that's good context. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't know if we're supposed to be asking specific questions about this application since it's not even born yet. But I'm struck by the concept of who was Alex, and first of all, and would there be an offense to that family or whatever if it was changed? And if I may, let me ask another more fundamental question. What I think I heard you say is that we're going to be starting our meetings every other month beginning in December. Potentially, December. So our next meeting after December would be February, and the meeting where this will come to the council is in April. So in February, you're suggesting that we would have the opportunity to make recommendation or not to the council as to whether this application even sees the light of day.
Commissioner Blankenship, just to be clear, if the city council approves the modification to the bylaws that was approved this evening, we anticipate that would go into effect in January. So you would meet every other month starting in January. The December meeting that we would need to have would be considered a special meeting because it would be outside the current schedule allotment.
Okay, so that would mean March would be the meeting that we would have prior to the April that this would be, the concept of changing names would be discussed.
Precisely.
And so our recommendation, one way or the other, would be done at that March meeting.
That's correct.
So that's important to recognize that we're going to be getting more information about this application even before it's been approved for.
Right. So to Commissioner Blankenship's point, this application just spurred the need to share with the commission the policy. The commission as a whole should look at the totality of parks, facilities that you would recommend or not recommend. It may be amongst you, if there's not a consensus, that nothing gets submitted to the city council, or perhaps there is parks or facilities that you recommend for renaming. If that would be the case, you would make that recommendation to the city council, who would then take it up under their consideration to designate a facility or not designate a facility. If something was then designated, the policy timeline then starts at that point. If no facility is recommended by the council for renaming or naming, then there would be no applications received within the time frame that is allotted within the policy.
And I asked about the original naming, and you said it's on Alex Road, but I guess to Commissioner Blankenship's point, do we need to be concerned about anyone named Alex?
I can find out
Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
the specific name.
Well,
why we
I
named
think
it
the
Alex.
concern is like, we don't want to rename a park that's named after someone that it was intentionally named
Right.
after. If it's just geographical, I think that's fine, but also, what if there's a sweet Alex out there who's going to be heartbroken? So we want all the information, so.
Right, again, we do have an application which brought it forward
Right.
to this, so this should be reviewed as all of our facilities. So
Yeah.
your recommendations can be consistent with that.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yes, Commissioner
So
Owens.
just procedurally, so say I know of a facility that doesn't have a name that it might be nice to use. Do I let someone know ahead of time, or do I wait till that night that we meet and then bring it up then?
Anything consistent with the Brown Act, any items of discussion for the commission should be brought before the commission at a commission meeting. So personally, if you have, constituents that you're talking to and want to get information, that's certainly fine within your role as a commissioner, as well as a resident. But anything that needs to be brought before the commission as a commission item should be presented here at the floor.
Okay. I don't see it on the, are there any other questions about this item? And I don't see it on the agenda, but any commissioner reports? I don't know why that's not on there. Are we not doing commissioner reports anymore?
We can certainly have commissioner reports.
And I think also next time, we would all love an update about what you've been doing for the last couple of months. Have you been, lounging or whatever? We would love an update as to
Yes.
how busy you've been. Just a general of Parks and Rec. I think that would be, we want to see that. We want to hear from you. Are there any commissioner reports, anyone that you've experienced or that you have anything to say of any type? Yeah, Commissioner Blankenship.
I was curious before Mr. Olson sits down, if you were going to go over the parks use permit process. Is he thinking, or did I not get through?
I don't know.
Mark, may I ask you a question?
Oh, he has to be at his special
Okay.
seat.
Yes, sir.
Now he can talk to you.
Now you can talk. Were you going to say anything about the parks use permitting process tonight?
I wasn't planning on tonight, no.
Okay,
Okay. Anything else?
that's it.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? I have a question as far as how the parks are back open, the park facilities are back open. What has that been like?
Chair Sue, fellow commissioners, the parks are open. Obviously, anybody that's been paying attention the last several months, it's been a moving scale. But the parks have been open for quite some time. The playgrounds opened last
Right,
week.
the playgrounds, yes.
So that was kind of the last park amenity that was still closed. That guideline from the state changed about 2 weeks ago, and we were able to get all of our playgrounds open late last week. We got most of them open within a few days, but there was a couple that actually were actually brand new. They never really opened because they were being installed, and then we had to shut them down. So there was significant growth around the fencing. So those took a few extra days to get open. Our facilities are running with programs in them, minus the senior centers. That's still something that has not come back for understandable reasons. But the rest of our facilities are not necessarily open to the public, but we are having programs within them
Right.
for registration, which that's been going on since we were allowed to do that in June.
Okay.
May I ask, as far as the senior center and those programs, I understand, I read into what you were saying. Is there any type of outreach to the senior citizens in their homes or whatever could possibly be done so we can keep their minds healthy?
Commissioner Chiffon, Parks and Rec Commissioners, yes, it's an excellent question. Ever since we've had to kind of go through this process, we've had extensive outreach to our senior population, many of which attended our facilities because of the nutrition program, which had to be completely adjusted to a home-delivered program. So there's been that daily outreach for the individuals in the nutrition program, as well as our staff just kind of making well calls, randomly making sure they have everything. Our transportation program modified greatly as well. We went from delivering individuals to do grocery shopping to grocery shopping and delivering them to the individuals so that they could protect themselves. So that is slowly transitioning back to where people are feeling more comfortable. So we've had to take modifications into consideration to make sure we're being safe and protecting not only our staff, but also the individuals who are participating in those programs. We are working on, there has been some changes just this week, really, with respect to senior programming that we are reviewing at this time and making plans to potentially bring some of that programming back. And so we hope to have that in place in the next couple weeks. That literally just changed in the last probably 48 hours. So we have some ability, a lane to operate in, for lack of a better term, but we want to make sure that we can do so in a safe manner, and it may require us kind of putting our programming in not the senior centers, because we want to have more space and more access. So those are the logistics we're working on right now.
Just one more thing. I don't know if you could, if it's legal to even answer, but have you found or has your staff reported that they've encountered people that have had issues because of the loss of the ability to go to the centers? Has it affected them greatly, like we're seeing in the news?
Commissioner Chiffon, fellow commissioners, obviously, I think, it would, I don't know the specifics, but this has been a difficult time for everybody, and particularly seniors that have isolation challenges. Fortunately, we have staff who have worked at our centers for a very, very long time and are pretty knowledgeable of the individuals, so we've been able to stay connected with them. We've had a couple things that we've referred to some other agencies to make sure people had the assistance, whether it be a food program or a social service program. So the fact that we've been able to refer them tells me that my staff is at least making good contact and are aware of any potential issues that we were facing.
Okay. All right, does anyone outside of chambers have any questions, concerns, reports? *6 to unmute yourself. Okay. Well, then our next, it looks like we'll have a special meeting in December and potentially some in January and March, and we have all sorts of good things going on. Thank you guys all so much for coming and making this a priority in these weird times. So, all right, meeting adjourned.